Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here is your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode in the People in Fundraising weekly nonprofit podcast series. Today is Monday, April 24th, 21st, 2025, and I am delighted to profile Ilana Xinos today. And before we get into having Ilana tell us about the work she does, where she's located, I did want to just say that I'm very excited to talk with Ilana, specifically because her employer is in the mold of these really interesting local, regional, state nonprofits that do a lot of work in their local communities for very specific causes. And that's a real topic of interest for me as a podcast host, is to welcome guests on who work really at the grassroots level, because there are so many nonprofits across the United States and internationally that do these really impactful, focused initiatives. And so, Ilana, thank you for joining us today. And I'm excited for you to tell our audience a little bit about you, where you work, what your title is, and we'll go from there, please.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Tim, first for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And for everyone out there, hi, my name is Ilana Xinos, like Tim said. I work for the North American Bison Discovery Center in Jamestown, North Dakota, and I am the executive director there.
Wonderful. Thank you. And this may be a great moment, Ilana, to share my screen. This is the website for the North American Bison Discovery Center. And you've got a very colorful website here. Upcoming event. We can maybe talk about that later on.
Sure.
And I love, the mission right here: advocate for the restoration of the North American bison through education and outreach. And I think for me, I'm a transplant from New England, moved out to Utah about 7 years ago. And during the pandemic summer, we took my family up to Yellowstone, and that's where I first actually saw bison herds, small herds, one or two buffalo. And there's something just incredible about seeing a bison in person. So that was like, as I was thinking about local, grassroots nonprofits, I thought I'd love at some point to get someone on. So thank you for saying yes to representing this majestic animal. That at one point there were 30 million at least buffalo roaming most of the United States. So
Most of North America.
that's right. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
I hate to correct you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That is totally fine. Correct away. I've already upped the month and the day, so
Right.
I'm a little rusty. I took some time off from the podcast. Well, Ilana, thank you for introducing yourself by your title as executive director at the North American Bison Discovery Center. As I always do with each guest, if you could please spend a few minutes talking about how you entered the fundraising development profession. And you shared a very interesting insight with me before we began recording about your response to this question that I think will be really refreshing for our audience to hear.
Okay, well, I'll give it to you. So, as I was thinking about the answer to this question, I thought, well, I suppose I should say that I've never actually considered myself in the fundraising profession.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of thought of myself in the bison profession, and, part of what we have to do if we want to continue to achieve our mission and to grow is to fundraise. So it's always, to me, just been a part of a larger thing that we do. And you and I had talked about, when you don't have very many employees, you do everything.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And you've been the executive director now for 10 years, correct?
Yes, I've been here for 10 years. Um, you want to know how I got here?
I would love to hear that. Yes.
Okay. All right. So I came here via a crazy route.
Okay.
I was going to grad school at LSU.
Okay.
And so at the time, I was married and my husband was graduating. And we were both in the PhD program. He got a job in Jamestown, North Dakota, and I just followed along. And let's just say after a while, I was deciding maybe I don't want to write a dissertation
Okay.
because maybe, I just want to teach. I was just having one of those like crises of like, what am I doing? Is this what I want to do? Can I publish it? Is it going to be read? Who cares? Do I even care anymore? I was just in it for so long that I
Yeah.
didn't realize that I even had a choice anymore.
Mm.
So I decided, okay, what I really want to do is teach. So I started teaching online before it was totally cool, like way before COVID. And then I had been doing that for about 3 years and designing online courses. And it was back in the days of Skype. So I was just using Skype. My only friends were on Skype.
Okay.
And so I got really like I was thinking like I really wish I had a job where I could like use my car and interact with people.
Yeah.
So I started looking at the classifieds and I saw this job for the executive director of at the time we were called the National Buffalo Museum, and I can talk about that later.
Okay.
But I went and visited and I thought, goodness gracious, I'm here from the East Coast. Like I'm from Virginia. I was like, I barely know what a bison is. And I walked in the museum and I was like, I don't know. Can I do this whole job? Just, it seemed kind of almost like boring to me,
Okay.
like just one animal.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I did it. I went for it. And pretty soon after I was hired, I started realizing, holy moly, these aren't just animals. I think I might have had an experience like and when people see them and they say they're majestic, but it's true.
Yeah.
I started learning that bison are much more meaningful,
Mm.
like to the earth, to history, to who we are as people, whether or not we're talking about as Americans, whether we're not talking about like indigenous roots. But I mean, there's just so much more to bison. So I kind of just opened up and I was the one who basically exemplifies, we say this as part of what we tell people is to know bison is to love them.
Yeah.
If anybody, I know this can happen for anybody because it happened for me. I mean, I knew they were brown and I was kind of like, I don't know what, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't know what a hay bale was. I knew nothing.
Yeah.
And I came in and now, I drive a tractor. I do all the stuff. I go out, I do the pasture chores a lot of the times. And,
Okay.
what I can tell you is that I can learn something new about bison every single day
Mm.
just by going to observe them. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a convert.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
That's terrific. So you've been in this role as executive director for 10 years. The North American Bison Discovery Center has been around for about 30 years, as you mentioned.
Yes.
I'd love for you to talk a little bit, Ilana, about how the center has grown. You mentioned earlier it had a different name when you first became affiliated with it. So how has it grown? How has it evolved in your tenure? Um, whether that's artifacts, artwork, the rebranding you mentioned. You do tours to look at bison
Mhm.
herds. So anything along
Mhm.
those lines, please.
Sure. So since 2015, when I started, we have grown significantly. And I think I first started noticing it like I think I thought I was making like low-hanging fruit decisions. I was like, why is our admission so low? This is crazy. So I would do some like comparisons, like, I was like, did you guys know like a matinee is cheaper than us? But sometimes, museums don't have to charge admission. That's part of their ability, and that wasn't part of our experience. Like we had to charge admission. So
Mm.
what I have seen is just in our admission. So I think after the first 5 or 6 years, we started making improvements and our admissions numbers rose like 150%. And I was like, whoa, this
Yeah.
is bearing out what I think. Make things better. People are going to come. Be excited. People are going to come. So, what I think I've seen is just like the vision of who we want to be as an organization. Um, we want to be the place that the public like turns to ask questions when they have questions about bison,
Yeah.
right? And bison restoration. So I've seen as a board, as staff, that we have slowly been working ourselves into that niche that we want to do. So, like you had said before, when I arrived, our organization was known as the National Buffalo Museum. It
Mm.
had been open since 93.
Okay.
Um, an interesting thing about it, if you guys are wondering why, a National Bison Museum would pop up in the, metropolitan area of Jamestown, North Dakota.
Really, let's hear it.
Okay, I got a great story. So in 1959, there was a man named Harold Newman, and he owns this. It's now quite a big company called Newman Signs, and they do billboards. But at the time, he hand painted billboards, and he was, I think, a real entrepreneur and like kind of like a um, brand. He wanted to brand the city in
Okay.
some way. He wanted to create a brand for the city. He saw that vision. And so what he did was I guess was started this, I don't know who actually paid for it to get built, but he started this desire, got the word out that we needed a buffalo statue, a big buffalo statue.
Oh, okay.
So this is how Jamestown, North Dakota earned its name of being the Buffalo City. We are home since 1959 to the world's largest buffalo monument, which is a 26-foot tall, 60-ton concrete buffalo statue.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's adjacent um, to our building. We're not, we don't own it, but it is right there. It belongs to the city.
Okay.
So when that happened, so we're already the Buffalo City, there was this group of local leaders, businessmen, like drinking coffee in the morning at the Perkins, and they thought, it'd be really cool if we had a herd of bison grazing in that pasture beneath around the world's largest buffalo. It would
Mm.
be like the perfect addition to the city. We can have an interpretive center.
Oh,
And about that time, there was another organization, I think they were located in Pierre, South Dakota, but at the time they were called the well, I'll tell you what they're called now. Now they're called the National Buffalo Foundation.
okay.
And they were looking for a museum to house their growing collection of art and artifacts.
Nice.
And the National Buffalo Foundation is part of more of like an industry organization.
Okay.
So there is a bison ranching and production industry, which we'll talk about.
Mm.
But so they collaborated and made an agreement. So we are home and have been home to the National Buffalo Foundation's collection.
Oh,
And they also administer or they own the Buffalo Hall of Fame, which is something that honors people who have contributed to bison, buffalo restoration and the industry and stuff like that over the years.
interesting. So that's an interesting partnership that goes back quite a while.
Yeah, it does. And then I suppose I should tell you after that, in 2023, we rebranded as part of a larger strategic planning process. So what we saw is that, hey, there's a lot of opportunity out here. We don't see that there's one organization who is the go-to place for not just bison. So we'll talk about bison. Um, Bison have people have a lot of different ideas about, how to manage bison, if bison should be wildlife, if they're also livestock,
Yeah.
what should they have cattle DNA? You know what I mean? There's so many you wouldn't think there were so many hot button issues about bison, but there are. And so there's a lot of people who just completely flat disagree.
Mm.
We are coming in as a neutral party. Like
Yeah.
my goal for people that leave our museum is to be like, man, bison are cool. Like, I never knew X about bison or Y.
Totally.
So we come to the plate with a different, I would say, agenda. All our agenda is this. We want you to know about the value of bison as a keystone species. We want you to know how um, ranchers and producers make decisions about bison. We want you to know about the cultural value that bison have to indigenous tribes.
Sure.
We want you to know that if you eat bison, you're actually helping to um, sustain their restoration to help them grow.
Mhm.
It seems counterintuitive to a lot of people. So
Sure.
we're just here to provide that information. So moving forward, we had decided some things that we want to do is expand virtually
Okay.
because as we said, we're not in a metropolitan area, and we found out quickly the year after COVID that we will max our building's capacity if we have another year like that. So we
Mm.
can only be so big in
Oh,
that in there, but we want to do things with traveling exhibits, partnerships,
yeah.
possibly in the future mobile exhibits, but lots on our we're hopefully looking forward to doing lots of virtual programming and
Cool.
um, interactive type exhibits on our website.
Oh,
Um, yeah, I mean, one of the things that we know now is that we don't want to just share the historical impact of bison, but we want to share today and tomorrow. Um, so I to get kind of back to fundraising though,
yeah.
what I have learned is that as our as our future becomes clearer to us and as we focus, our fundraising efforts also have become more focused. And I think that's so helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, before I was like, oh, we got to write a letter at the end of the year. I should say something. I don't know what to do. Google help. But now, I mean, we can say, like last year when we sent out our annual appeal letter, we were telling people that the funds we raise are going to help launch our traveling trunk exhibits. They're
Mm.
going to go to developing a guest curator program that's going to prioritize first person perspectives
Mm.
and basically share what we're doing with broader audiences. So, I mean, it's been kind of cool.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. And you struck a really important note, for me, just in my experience, not just focusing on the historical significance of the bison. And, for example, my family went up to Yellowstone and Glacier National Parks a few
Hmm.
summers ago. And on the way somewhere in Montana, southwest Montana, there was a sign off the highway that said Madison Buffalo Jump. And it was directing people. I thought, man, like I grew up watching Dances with Wolves. I'm not trying to be flip. Like that was my
No.
first was like, it's an amazing creature. And so we passed by the sign and we didn't pull off to go look at it. It was like 40 miles off the interstate. But a buffalo jump is where indigenous people would corral herds of
Hmm.
bison off a cliff, and um, you know that's how indigenous people survived. They used pretty much every piece of the
Yeah.
animal. So I'd like to see it someday. But I think, as you mentioned, like don't just focus on the historical. And, so yes, we do have these sites and and other things. But like you also mentioned, uh, the restoration, what you can do now by eating bison that helps preserve current and future bison herds, and how we can make it be a living aspect of interest and educational interest.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that one of the reasons that we chose or we decided to change our name, um, one thing is that museums don't sound as cool to
Hmm.
like younger people.
Okay.
They just are like, I don't know about that, you know?
Yeah.
Like my daughter was like, "Hey mom, one day will you take me to see to a museum where we can see those old phones with circles?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, no. By the way, I work at one." But it was crazy. So the other thing about that is there was so much about bison that I was learning. Like foodies love bison, right? So there's food science, there's environmental science, and I was thinking like so many people would be interested in the science aspect that we really don't have a way to bring in.
Yeah.
Um, and then there are all sorts of other things like art, culture, history, but the stuff that's going on today is really, really, really important. And I think that people don't understand. Um, and we'll talk about our herd later, and I can
Yeah.
explain to you how we use that to teach people things.
Yeah, that's a great segue, Alana. If you actually want to now talk about the two bison herds that the center maintains and how
Okay.
they're modeling commercial ranching and cow calf ranching operations.
Yeah. So one of the things that, well, our history as an organization sort of is an outgrowth of that informal partnership with another organization that is basically focused on the industry. So there were a lot of ranchers and things like that, and we just have that different perspective.
Yeah.
However, um, I guarantee you, you're a good one. You're like, I went to Yellowstone and
Uh-huh.
I saw bison. So most of the people that come to the museum, if I say, have you ever seen bison?
Yeah.
Yes, at Yellowstone. Where do you think most bison live? You're going to get Yellowstone, 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 Yellowstone. Sometimes Custer State Park, and that's only if they're from
I
close. I don't know. They might have heard of Custer State Park once,
I was
but
there last
they took
summer.
a trip to Mount Rushmore.
Yes.
But
Yeah, last
uh,
summer.
yeah, what I find is we have our herds are basically a live collection, and
Mm,
they're one of our educational tools that we use to advocate for sustainable population growth, right? And we also get the chance to offer visitors a way to safely observe bison.
awesome.
Um, but our purpose in adopting that ranch model is it really reflects it's reflective of the fact that most bison across North America live on ranches. And
Yeah.
this is very little known. So I think people would be shocked to find out that a fraction of bison are actually living in places like um, national parks and preserves. So I
Yeah.
would say 90, 95% of the bison you're going to find living in a ranch, on a ranch
Oh,
setting.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that is not what the public thinks. And so that's important to me and to us. One is just getting people to understand where bison live
Yeah.
and how they live and all of the different ways, and that we can have, the greatest conservation success story in the United States is the bison story. We can have that. There can be people who eat bison meat from the store, and they can be happy that they're helping to keep bison production going.
Yeah.
Um, in the United States, there is just not that much philanthropic land around where we can just be like, hey, let's take these million acres and just let bison just do their thing,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And then to top it off, which, everything's always our fault, and historically we make all the mistakes, but we came in and we built infrastructure.
Mm,
And bison were the keystone species, walking, eating, pooping, stomping,
right.
doing their thing. They don't have that much of a choice now. So if we put them out in our pasture, let's say there's 200 acres that they can graze from, we like to make sure we have the most native plants as possible,
Yeah.
right? And once we start managing the land appropriately, we know that bison are these like little engineers, and they'll keep helping us. They'll kind
Oh,
of garden for us.
oh,
So those are the kinds of things we like to show people.
mm,
Um, yeah, and basically we just because we show the ranching model, that's the model that we're able to show. We're able to explain to people who may not know that, of course, our our little herd's gonna like bleed money. We pay for them to be there basically.
yeah.
But if you want to understand the types of decisions that a rancher would make, we can tell you why.
Oh,
And I
oh,
think people, once they have some more knowledge of why is this the case, um, and also like just this understanding that it doesn't matter where bison live, anywhere humans are making decisions for them. We
yeah.
can call it, they call it management. Most people have heard of wildlife management. Then
Right.
they hear of livestock management. And those two phrases, they carry with them different connotations,
Yeah.
you know? And
Yeah.
so just to understand that we're just talking about people making decisions, because we're just we came in we came in and did things. We
Right.
got railroads, and bison can't move the way they once did.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
that's
how many bison are on the two um, ranches that you oversee?
so we have and the we have a north pasture that surrounds the museum.
Oh,
We
cool.
typically keep about 5 to 7 cow calf pairs
Okay.
and one breeding bull.
Uh,
So usually 5 to 7 cows. We hope they all will have calves, but sometimes they don't. You
hmm,
know,
yeah.
um, on the south side of the interstate, we'll so when bison are about 6 months old, typically, uh, they're weaned from their mom. If they're in a ranch setting, they get weaned, so they don't drink milk anymore. And to do that, you kind of have to separate them,
Oh,
or
okay.
you can. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it,
Yeah.
but we send ours to, after a while, after they're comfortable, we send them to our south pasture. So a lot of our younger animals will live there and grow up. There's about six typically adult females who can have babies, and then there's another breeding bull over there.
Oh,
We single sire both of our pastures. That's really important,
hmm.
um, because to keep bison in any kind of fence, you need to keep them happy. They'll
Oh,
get through any kind of fence they don't want, but also during breeding season, there can be um, contentious
sure.
relationships between two bulls. You've probably seen that somewhere.
Yes. Yes.
But we like to keep it just nope. And you don't need to have like one bull can definitely do the job of impregnating all of those cows.
Sure.
Six is nothing. I think usually it would be like 1 to 15 or something.
Oh, wow.
1 to 12, 1 to 15, and then you would want another bull. Yeah, I know way too much. Maybe TMI. Um, but so that's why we do what we do on a like a mini scale. And we have, I know we talked about this before, but you talked about, do we have partners?
Yeah.
And we don't have like we don't specifically say, I'm going to partner with you. But what we do have is a vast network of advisors and people that we can call upon to help us.
Great.
We don't do it just for breeding purposes, but we have people help us transport animals sometimes,
Hmm.
help us design low stress handling facilities,
Oh,
um, train staff on low stress bison handling, which I think is really important. Do things like consult with health concerns and any kind of related issue. Um, I'm I've got people's numbers at the ready and I will call all the time. Here's what I see. What can you tell me? You know?
that's awesome to have that community to draw
Yeah.
on.
And in turn, like there are bison operations who want to get into agritourism. And so we offer support to them in helping them if they want to design an education program
Okay.
or, and I can just sometimes say to them, okay, don't tell everybody everything. Think about what one nugget you want people to leave. Like tell them about your particular mission, why you do this,
Yeah.
give them a story.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Mhm.
That's great. Speaking of communities and partners, maybe we could go to question 4 about
Okay.
in general, without naming names, please, but who, for the North American Bison Discovery Center, what does your donor base look like? Is it heavily weighted on corporations, individuals? You mentioned companies involved and interested in agritourism. I think there may be a really interesting ecosystem of partners that, as you raise awareness and operate, could turn into donors, and people just in general that are interested in the bison and want to support your mission.
Yeah, so our current donor base is mainly individuals. And
Okay.
I would say just based on um, the fact that like I couldn't for years give a lot of attention. I was one of the only professional staff for years,
Okay.
and I could not do any more than those kind of frantic, letters in December that I'm like, oh, what do I say, But um, we would have one fundraiser a year, and that was kind of like what we were known for. But that's all we could really do at the time. And as we start thinking about who we want to be, what we want to do, who partners might be, we want to recruit more corporate partners. Like, what does a partnership look like? And
Yeah.
then who would those partners be? And my initial thoughts, and I guess our initial thoughts are, I would love to find those corporations whose philanthropic efforts are focused on conservation, wildlife, sportsmen things. Like you wouldn't believe that there's like gun companies who have really, and
Yeah.
actually sportsmen or hunters were one of the groups who were really worked at the beginning towards a restoration for conservation efforts.
Oh,
Yeah. There was this
interesting.
place called the Boone and Crockett Club, I think that was, yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting history, but um, I also think that there are so many organizations out there who use the bison as their logo and
Mm.
maybe don't even recognize why, because we haven't said this, but the bison is our national mammal.
Yeah.
And even prior to that, like you said, there is just this sort of magnificence or this symbolic weight that bison has.
Yeah.
It helps to identify America and Americans. It helps to say that something's strong, something's resilient, really athletic. So those organizations, I would like to do a deep dive with some of them and maybe try to work on uncovering how their name came, how their logo came to be, and how does that logo and that idea of bison really reflect their organization and
Totally.
their organization's goals or how they started, because I think there's something really cool that people will find out
Yeah.
once they start thinking about why did so and so, why do we have this particular logo?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, the Buffalo Bills come to mind first and foremost.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think, well, we're not the Buffalo State. We know who that is. No, we know who that is, but I just think that like people just don't realize what their connection is to bison. And I think
Yeah.
similarly, when you go see a bison, like when you go to observe a bison, there's something to that animal that's more. You might not be able to put your finger on what it is, but you're just standing back going, holy moly.
Yeah.
Like you're
Totally.
looking in their eyes and you're just like, what is going on back there, buddy?
Yeah.
Like they've just got this weight to them and this, they look very wise. I don't, they're just, and they know what to do.
Mm.
They know exactly what to do. I think interestingly, you'll see um, that the cows know where to um, give birth. They know
Oh,
which grasses to eat. They roam in different places all the time, but depending on the growing season, that's nothing we can tell them. They
yeah.
just know. You can see how they work together. You can see how they're good for the earth. And I think one thing that people don't realize is if we observe bison, we can see how we can be better humans. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Bison being bison are they naturally complement the land when, they have the available tools. They are herd, they need the herd. Everyone has a job. There's a crazy cool hierarchy that they communicate very well. So you could see one animal just kind of like look at another one in the eye, that one knows to get away.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
so many different things that we don't think about. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on that topic of, there's something, intrinsically meaningful as citizens of this country and um, just the amazing attributes of the bison. I'd like to use that, topic of meaning, Ilana, and ask you, what's the most rewarding or meaningful aspect of your role as executive director, and how is raising awareness about
yeah.
bison meaningful to you, please?
Um, that is a really great question. To me, my personal story with bison is really meaningful.
Mm,
I came in as someone who was like, "Ew, this could be boring," and I pretty soon found out that whatever I thought was completely wrong.
mm,
I wondered how am I gonna have any enjoyment? Like, I mean, I know I like to be the boss, but I mean, how am I gonna do this?
yeah.
And when I realized all the depth and the layers that there are to bison, and like I just really told you that every time I'm out there, I learn something new, whether I have to call someone to learn it, whether I'm observing. Um, it's very interesting. The more you spend time with them, the more, I mean, I know the animals just by the way their horns are and their body is structured. They do have ear tags, and sometimes I'm wrong, but most of the time I'm not, and I can guess it. So
Oh,
there's a lot of time you spend out there. And when I do take people on tours, there's so much that they can learn. And like we talked about it, like how can we be good humans? Let's start and watch the animals.
yeah.
I think the way people learned how to interact with bison using low stress handling was by watching cattle dogs and how cattle dogs approach them. So
Okay.
one thing I tell people all the time is bison are not predators, they're prey animals. Humans are predators.
Yeah.
So we need to watch ourselves when we are around bison. So we never drive straight for them because if they think you're going to hit them, we drive like this so they can see you and they're comfortable. Um,
Oh,
and I really, with that, like I love watching people get interested in bison. I don't care how they get interested. I don't care what nugget interests them. To me, it's like a super huge win because I know, and I don't remember if I've said this on this podcast, but we use this phrase to know bison. To know bison is to love them.
mm,
And we'll say to people now, like, we know that people, um, care about what they know about, which is why we're here to let you know about bison. And when we know that people support what they care about, and we know that's an easy sell.
yeah.
So, that's just one thing that I have found really meaningful. I know the animals are good for the environment. I know I'm not a black and white person. I'm always like a shades of gray person.
Mm.
So I'm really attracted to this idea that there are different viewpoints and that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think strangely enough, in this day and age, there's a lot of, this viewpoint or this viewpoint or this viewpoint, or else we hate you. We don't have to do that with Bison. And
Yeah.
I try to tell people not to do that. Let's just use this as an example to watch and just accept.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I find it, yeah, I kind of just find it awesome.
that is an awesome response. And I appreciate you sharing those reflections. We have about 5 minutes left, Ilana, and this was not on the questionnaire I sent you ahead of time, but before we were recording, you had talked about um, the work you've done as executive director, the
Mhm.
things you've learned, and also maybe the things that you're aware that you still need to learn in terms of the fundraising piece of this. So
Yeah.
anything you'd like to share? Because I think there will be people in our audience that can relate, directly to your experience, and also people that, as you were talking about, the donor base, and
Yeah.
mostly individuals, how do you get more into corporations and foundations? I would hope that maybe, as you talk, that some ideas come to mind for people in my audience that please reach out to Ilana and,
If you want to know how much you don't know, because she'll tell you how much she doesn't know.
well, but like that, no, I was thinking more like, hey, I've got an idea. Maybe have you thought about this? So,
Oh, yeah. No, I would love to have anybody's advice.
yeah,
What I have learned is there's a super huge value in fractional support
yeah,
and
yeah.
contractors of all kinds. One of the things, I'm just going to be giving you random things. Like, I didn't really know how important things like donor segmentation was.
Hmm.
There's so many years that we've been keeping data, and I am a very big data-based, evidence-based decisions person. I came from academia, and we were doing a lot with assessments. And our big thing is, what are we doing, and how will we know if we get there? And I wrote that everywhere
Yeah.
because I think that's so important. So, one of the things I just didn't know how to do was develop appropriate KPIs
Okay.
in regard to fundraising. Um, Gosh, I would love if there's anybody out there who knows how to develop partnership proposals,
Oh, yeah.
especially when you may not think you have value, in terms of like your website numbers or,
Yeah.
and that was another thing. Like people, like I never had time to use Google AdWords, and I know it's such a great resource and I can see it being used. We're right at the point, and I've been here 10 years to think about using that as marketing.
Mm.
Um, I've learned how we can be smart about using curation as marketing, marketing as fundraising. And like, there are things that I think I'm always thinking about plan A, B, C, and cross purposes,
Mm.
but trying to think of other things that I don't know because there's so many. Um, Even now, so we're supposed to be developing, or we have developed a comprehensive fundraising plan and need to do one for the next year. I'm still not sure our plan's right or appropriate. Like I'm just kind of um what I would do with most things is just like we called it like flinging spaghetti at the wall
Yes, yes,
and seeing what sticks.
totally.
So, I mean, honestly, I would love anybody's help. I would love like a support group of um organizations that are the size of mine. And we didn't talk about this, but in North Dakota, one of the things that nonprofits, charities can do is this thing called charitable gaming. I don't know if you
No,
knew about this.
no.
So our biggest revenue stream has been charitable gaming, which has
Mm.
and that's kind of like legal gambling.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
our we have been lucky for many of those years to get support like that. But what we know now is we want to move away from that being our biggest revenue streams and just being one of our revenue streams.
Oh,
So
yeah.
reliance on, one thing that you think will always be there and it might not. And just this year is one of the years that our board just decided we needed to do annual independent audits. And for years, we couldn't, um, it was like, gosh, that's such a huge expense. But now we're looking at it in terms of the value it can bring
Sure.
and the doors that it can open up. So we're like, let's bite the bullet and do it. So
Yeah.
there's just different things that, um, I don't know if I've said something stupid on here that fundraisers are like, no, no, that's wrong. Just tell me.
Yeah, and my wheels have been spinning. I've got some people I could mention to you offline,
Great.
in the fractional space, certainly, and in other spaces. So I'm happy to share that with you too.
Well, I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, this has just been a really enjoyable conversation, Ilana. Thank you so much. I've learned a great deal about Bison from listening to you, about the operations side of it. Um, you've done a really good job talking about the intricacies, the complexities, the challenges of smaller scale nonprofits and how you're trying to grow, responsibly as a mission and in support of the Bison under your care. This has been really enjoyable.
Thank you. I really appreciated it. And usually I'm quite nervous about things like this, but you really set me at ease.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, let's connect offline about some of that follow-up. Um,
Perfect.
so yeah, thank you. And so for our audience, you'll be able to find Ilana's conversation in July of 2025 on the various platforms that I'll list here. LinkedIn, which then will have a link to the YouTube component of the conversation, Podbean and Spotify for the audio only. And thanks to season one guest, my 100th guest, Luis Diaz, and his donor participation project for his sponsorship of my website. Ilana's conversation will be on the website peopleinfundraising.wordifysites.com. And Ilana, I look forward to staying in touch with you, and I wish you all the best for this upcoming June event at the
Thank
North
you.
American Bison Discovery Center.
Thanks. And everybody who's just watching, check out our website.
Totally. Yeah, the virtual offerings, educational offerings you mentioned there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.